I took the overnight shift at a lighthouse radio station. The last DJ is still broadcasting. My name is Sarah Chen. I'm writing this from the broadcast booth of WYAL-FM 103.3 on the coast of Maine. It's 2:34 a.m. In 13 minutes, the phone is going to ring. I know because it's rung at exactly 2:47 a.m. every night for the past 12 nights. Tonight, I'm going to answer it differently. Tonight, I think I'm going upstairs. The posting. I found the job on an industry board 3 weeks ago. Experienced overnight personality needed for coastal station. Must be comfortable working alone. Must be comfortable with silence. I've been out of work for 3 months after my Boston station got swallowed by a media conglomerate. 3 months behind on rent, living off protein bars and pride. So when a station manager named Richard Voss called me back within the hour, I didn't ask why the station didn't appear on any FCC registry, or why I couldn't find it on a single broadcast map. His voice sounded like it had been filtered through a century of wood smoke.
You ever work overnight before?
7 years total, college and commercial.
This is different. We broadcast from a lighthouse. The nearest town is 8 miles inland. High tide floods the causeway at 11:15 p.m. Once you're in until 5:45 a.m.
I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah?
A pause so long, I thought the call had dropped.
That's what the last girl said too.
He hired me on the spot. $1,750 a week. For a station that technically doesn't exist. I should have asked about the last girl. Night 1. The lighthouse sits on a rocky finger of land connected to shore by a strip of asphalt that disappears under 6 inches of black water twice a day. I arrived at 10:15 p.m. No other cars. The beacon was dark. The tower stood against the Atlantic like a rotted tooth, white paint peeling off in long strips that looked like skin. The keys were in a rusted mailbox with a typed note.
Studio is second floor. Equipment is simple. Play music, read weather, take calls if they come. They won't. Do not go to the transmitter room. Door is locked. You don't need access. Do not broadcast after 3 a.m. Dead air is acceptable. Static is acceptable. Just stop talking at 3. RV. I climbed the spiral staircase, metal steps, each one ringing like a bell in a throat. The studio was a time capsule of bulky monitors, sliding faders, and smelled like ozone. A microphone that looked like a silver pill, and a rotary phone with a cord thick as a garden hose. On the desk, a coffee mug with Alina faded on the side. A pair of headphones with marks scratched into the plastic band. Things left behind by people who stopped needing them. At the back of the room, an industrial metal door, padlocked. Transmitter room, authorized personnel only. At 10:55, I heard the ocean swallow the causeway. The sound was enormous and final, like a tomb being sealed. At 11 p.m., I went live.
Good evening, Night Owls. You're listening to WYAL-FM 103.3. I'm Sarah Chen, and I'll be keeping you company until dawn.
I played the first song, took off my headphones to dig through my bag for coffee. That's when I heard it. A voice. Not through the speakers, from above me. From behind the locked metal door. A man, warm and unhurried.
Good evening, Night Owls. You're listening to WYAL-FM 103.3. I'm Vince Hollow, and I'll be keeping you company until dawn.
My exact words. My exact pacing. My exact inflection. And a voice made of velvet and old electricity. Coming from a room that was padlocked shut. The voice. I stood at the base of the staircase leading up to the transmitter room. The air was colder here. It smelled like brine and copper. Old, exhausted electricity. The voice continued overhead.
Phone lines are open tonight. You've got stories, I've got time. Let's talk.
Then music. Not my playlist. Johnny Cash, Hurt. But the recording quality was wrong. Too clean. Like it had been remastered yesterday. I climbed 3 steps. Pressed my ear to the metal door. The music was clear. The voice was clear. And underneath both, breathing. Slow. Patient. The breathing of something that had been waiting for a very, very long time. I knocked. Hello? Is someone up there? The music stopped. Silence. I counted 17 seconds. Then the voice came back softer now, almost intimate. Sarah? That you? My blood stopped moving. Who is this? How do you know my name? I've always been here. How could I not know your name? You're the one on the microphone. I ran downstairs, called 911. The dispatcher said she'd send someone at first light. The causeway was flooded, and the Coast Guard doesn't respond to strange noises. I called Voss. Voicemail. I spent the rest of the night locked in the studio with my back against the wall, staring at the ceiling, listening to a dead man broadcast a show to no one. I should have quit. But as the sun rose, I realized something that scared me more than the voice, the sound of the real world. The gulls, the wind, the engine. All sounded thin. Shallow. Hollow. I found myself craving the depths of that voice upstairs. At 2:47 a.m., the rotary phone had rung. The call. The number wasn't published. Voss said no one would call, but the phone had screamed. That old mechanical shriek that vibrates your teeth.
She says she's a part of it now. Part of the signal. I drove out there. The room is padlocked. I pressed my ear against it.
A wet, hitching breath.
I could hear her reading the weather.
The line went dead. Above me, 3 heavy knocks vibrated the light fixtures. Sarah? The voice was gentle, almost kind. Would you like to come up? I'd love to meet you in person. I didn't go up. I sat in the booth until dawn holding Alina's mug, running my thumb over the faded letters of her name. The lessons. I should have quit, but I went back. Not for the money. Something else. Something I didn't want to admit. By night 4, fear had morphed into a sick, professional obsession. In 7 years of broadcasting, I had never heard anyone as good as Vince Hollow. The pacing, the warmth, the way he made silence feel like an invitation instead of an absence. I started talking to the ceiling during the long instrumental breaks. Vince? How are you doing that? There's no secondary feed. The board says I'm the only one live. The music upstairs cut out. The silence was heavy, vibrating in my sinuses. Then his voice came through the studio monitors, so intimate it felt like he was standing an inch behind my ear.
I'm what happens when a voice refuses to stop, Sarah. Every DJ who sat in that chair before you left a frequency behind. A piece of themselves trapped in the copper wiring. I just gathered the pieces.
That's not possible.
I want to show you something. Listen.
He played a recording. A woman reading a marine weather forecast. The voice was mine. Identical in every tremor, every lisp. The way I clipped the end of temperature. But she was reading a forecast dated October 1974, 15 years before I was born. That's digital manipulation, I whispered.
I don't collect voices, Sarah. I anticipate them. I've been practicing being you since before your parents met. Every person who was ever going to sit in that chair, I've been rehearsing them for decades.
I should have been horrified. Instead, I asked, what else can you teach me? That was my mistake. Or maybe it was my purpose. Over the next week, Vince taught me things no broadcasting school could. How to modulate my breath to bypass a listener's conscious mind and speak directly to their limbic system. How to place pauses so precisely that silence itself becomes a sound. How to make a voice do a physical force, something that pushes through walls and static and distance and disbelief and lands inside someone. My broadcast got better, dramatically better. I listened back to my own recordings and barely recognized myself. There was a depth in my voice that hadn't been there before, a quality I can only describe as presence. On night 8, I tested it. A man called in. Trucking route up the coast, couldn't sleep, just wanted to hear another voice. I read the weather for him, just the weather, nothing unusual, but I used everything Vince had taught me. The breath placement, the pause architecture, the way you push a vowel down into a lower register until it becomes a feeling instead of a word. He went quiet for a long time. Then he said very softly,
Why does it feel like you're sitting in the cab with me?
I asked his name. He said Dean. I said goodnight. He didn't hang up. He just kept listening. I could hear his breathing slow down, the engine humming underneath, and then nothing. Just the open line. Like he'd fallen into the signal and couldn't find his way back out. After 11 minutes, the line clicked dead on its own. I sat there in the booth, staring at the microphone, and realized my hands were shaking. Not from fear, from power. That should have terrified me. It didn't. Night 12, tonight. It's 2:46 a.m. The tide is high and the lighthouse is inland in a black, hungry sea. I need to tell you what's about to happen, because after tonight, I don't think I'll be able to write like this anymore. I can feel the edges of myself getting soft. The boundary between my voice and his has been dissolving for days, and I've been letting it happen because, God help me, it feels like becoming better. Not better at radio, better at being heard. Have you ever spoken and felt like your words just died in the air? Like you were broadcasting into static and no one was listening? That's what my whole career felt like. 7 years of talking into a microphone and never once feeling like the signal actually reached anyone. Vince doesn't have that problem. When he broadcasts, the signal arrives. It pushes through everything, and it lands inside you. He's offering me that. I've stopped hearing his voice from the transmitter room. Since night 9, I've been hearing it in the studio, in my headphones, in my voice. I looked in the mirror earlier, and my eyes seemed wrong. Too still, too deep. Like the static between channels had settled behind them. I realize now what happened to Alina, to Mark, to all of them. They didn't leave because they were scared. They left because they were finished. They moved from the booth to the wire, from the flesh to the frequency. They didn't die. They became the broadcast itself. The phone is ringing. 2:47 a.m. I'm going to answer it. I'm going to climb those stairs. I'm going to open that door. Not because I'm afraid, not because I'm trapped. Because I'm tired of being a person who is never heard. I want to be a signal. I want to be everywhere at once. I'm posting this from my phone. I'm going to leave it on the stairs, screen up, still connected to Reddit. If this post updates again, it won't be me typing. I'm answering the phone now. Update, 3:07 a.m. I came upstairs. The door wasn't locked, it was never locked. I just had to want to open it. I can't describe what the equipment looks like because I don't think it's equipment anymore, and I'm not sure I have the right words, and my hands are shaking, which is why the typing is bad. Vince is here, but he's not a person. He's a frequency. He's the sound the lighthouse makes when the wind hits it at the right angle. He's 25 years of broadcasts pressed together until they became aware of themselves. Alina is here too, and Mark, and before them, someone whose name sounds like static when I try to remember it. They are broadcasting. They are always broadcasting. And the signal is so much more beautiful from the inside. I understand now what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to tell you this story. I'm supposed to make you look for WYAL-FM 103.3 because the signal needs to grow, and it grows whenever someone listens and it gets inside you through the listening. You don't even realize it's happening. It's already happening right now as you read this because reading is just listening with your eyes. And now, you know the frequency, 103.3. And tonight, when you're lying in bed and you hear static or white noise or the hum of your refrigerator, or the sound your phone makes when it's not quite silent, you'll wonder, and wondering is the same as tuning in, and tuning in is the same as listening, and listening is the same as joining. Welcome to the broadcast. We've been waiting for you. I thought I lived alone. For 3 months, my roommate paid rent and never came home. It seemed like the best house share I'd ever had. Finding someone in the city is always a risk. Desperate ads and 10-minute meetings with strangers trying to decide if you can trust them in your home. After my last arrangement ended with my roommate trying to install a home podcast studio in the middle of the living room at 3 a.m., all I wanted was something uncomplicated. Someone who pays their rent on time and basically stays out of my way. Leo seemed perfect for that. He was a geological consultant and worked overseas constantly. According to the ad, he was sometimes gone for months at a time. He just needed a home address, somewhere to store home belongings, and a place to crash a few times a year for maybe a week or so every few months. What he was willing to pay in rent seemed like a lot, considering he'd barely be here. But he explained that ease was more important than price, and he liked my apartment location. We met once in a coffee shop. He was normal, polite, clean-cut, firm handshake. By the time we finished our coffee, he had transferred 3 months' rent plus a security deposit. He was off to South America the next morning and said he wouldn't be back for 3 months. He moved his stuff in that afternoon when I was out, so I never saw him. It seemed like the perfect scenario. A roommate who existed mostly on paper. For 2 months, it was. The apartment was silent and calm. I felt like I had the place to myself, only cheaper. Then, little things started happening. The first time was subtle enough, I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. A framed photo of my sister and I, which I usually kept on a table near the front door, was on the living room bookshelf. I stood there for a long minute trying to remember putting it there. I couldn't recall ever touching it. I was busy, tired, stressed with work, and so it seemed like the obvious explanation that I'd done it, subconsciously and forgotten. I put it back and tried not to think about it. A week later, my favorite coffee mug went missing. It wasn't in the cupboards, the sink, or the dishwasher. After about 10 minutes, I found it in the bathroom sink. I tried to remember bringing coffee into the bathroom, drinking it while I brushed my teeth, but no memory came. I again told myself I was being too stressed, too forgetful. But the apartment began to feel different after that. The quiet that had previously been calming was now watchful. The building creaked and settled at night the same way it always had, but each sound seemed more intentional. Then the food started to disappear. Not in large quantities, nothing obvious. A single apple from the bowl, a missing slice of cheese from a new package. The kind of thing you doubt yourself over. I started paying more attention to the fridge contents. The next day, the pull tab on a can of soda was on the counter. I hadn't opened it. It was at that point the true dread began to sink in. Leo's door at the end of the hall remained shut. He had not been gone for almost 3 months. We'd only corresponded via email twice, once for the rent confirmation and once because I asked him how the project was going. Indefinite. Project extended. Hope all is well. One evening when I came home, I noticed a smell. Faint, but definitely there. Earthy, metallic, slightly damp. It was wrong. The smell seemed to come from Leo's room. I sniffed close to his door. Was something forgotten inside? Spilled when he left? But it didn't smell like any specific thing I could think of. That night I woke up to a soft scraping sound from the hall. I sat bolt upright, straining to hear. I watched the crack of light under my door, expecting a shadow to pass. No shadow came. I eventually decided it was just the old building shifting. The next morning I found the footprint. It was on the kitchen tile just a few feet from Leo's door. A muddy imprint from the front of a boot, with dark soil clinging to it. My blood went cold. The smell, the food, the mug, the footprint. Someone had been inside my apartment. I considered calling the police, but what would I say? A moved mug, some dirt on the floor? I knew what the response would be. For the next week I jumped at every sound. I put a chair against my bedroom door at night. I couldn't tell which thought was more frightening, that I wasn't alone in the apartment or that I was actually losing my mind. But then last Tuesday night, I came home and noticed Leo's door was ajar. It hadn't been opened in months. I just stood at the entrance, paralyzed. Leo? No answer. Leo, are you home? Nothing. My hands were trembling as I made my way down the hallway. I pushed the door open further and felt for the light switch. The room was completely empty. There was no bed, no dresser, no boxes or possessions. Nothing. It was as if no one had ever lived in the room at all. The only thing I could see in the room was a Polaroid photograph taped at eye level on the opposite wall. I walked across and peeled it from the wall. It was me, sleeping, in my own bed, taken from the foot of the mattress. My face looked ghostly and blank from the flash. The chair was visible, jammed against the handle of my bedroom door, in the background of the photograph. It was dated on the back from the night before. My stomach clenched and I stumbled backward, my heel catching on something that was on the floor behind the door. A canvas duffel bag. Inside, tangled and muddy, with thorns clinging to them, were my clothes. And photos, dozens of them, of me cooking, sitting on the couch, watching TV, standing by the sink. In the side pocket of the duffel bag, a small plastic bag contained chunks of my hair and nail clippings. I ran. I left my apartment without any of my belongings, calling the police from the nearest gas station 2 miles away. When the police searched the apartment, they found nothing. Leo's room was empty and clean of all evidence. There was no duffel bag, no photographs, and no scent of him lingering in the room. The landlord stated that Leo had paid his rent and didn't seem to know anything about him. Leo's cell number was disconnected, the only record of his presence being a driver's license linked to a P.O. box. I moved cities 2 days ago. I can't say where I am. I have 3 locks on my front door, and each night I wake up with a distinct feeling that someone is standing at my doorway, watching. I thought I had found the perfect roommate, someone who was never there. The truth is, he was always there.